We're joined by Governor Kristi Noem for our weekly chat with the governor here on KWAT. And Governor, I guess at the point of this recording, we're about roughly at the midway point of the session here. I believe the last scheduled business day of the main run of the session is March 10th. Just give us your perspective, your thoughts on how the session has gone so far.
Well, I think the main focus of this session is the budget. We had an incredible year as far as revenues go, with record-setting growth in our sales tax dollars that have come in the door. But when the budget is put together for the fiscal year that is following, we have to, look into the future. So that requires a lot of consultations with economists, what we think the different industries in South Dakota are going to do, what the environment is, and if we think we can continue, growing, or if we're going to hit a bit of a recession here because of what we're seeing at the federal level. So, all that is coming together. I think there's a lot of discussion on where to spend one-time dollars that we have, and then to look at ongoing commitments and make sure that they're responsible. I think that the big discussion right now is what will our growth be next year? We had 16% increase in sales tax growth last year. That was historic and amazing. I don't believe it's sustainable. In fact, I see increasing energy costs. I see the drought that the state is facing. Ag is facing a really challenging environment in the future. Ag is by far our number one industry, and when it struggles, so does the state. So I'm encouraging the legislators just to be conservative in their projections, to make sure that we're spending our dollars wisely and not overspending in the budget, to make sure that we don't end up back here in a year or two cutting programs and cutting commitments that we've made to the people of South Dakota.
South Dakota's economy, of course, has remained very strong throughout the pandemic, Governor, and I believe you've got some new revenue numbers, revenue estimates out, or they are going to be released very soon. Does it look like the positive numbers are going to continue?
Well, the revenue numbers that will come out are just for the last month of data collection. So that includes the Christmas shopping season. We expect those numbers to be strong. But we also know from talking to every economist that the legislature uses, that we use in our office, and then the national experts, that it's going to be kind of tough going in the future. So I expect that revenues will look good with what comes out this week. But that also looking into the long term, it's going to be tough. We see South Dakota is a heavily energy dependent state. It's cold in the wintertime. Families' budgets use up more of their dollars just to keep their houses warm, keep them cold in the summer, and we drive a long ways to get anything done. A lot of families in South Dakota, just to go get groceries, have to drive 20, 30, 40 miles. That's very different than the more urban states. So a bigger part of our budgets are consumed by energy costs, and with the increases that we've seen, that requires that more families don't have dollars to spend on fun stuff and dollars that are optional for doing things that their family would like to do. That and we have this drought, which people talk a lot about the different industries in South Dakota. Ag is number one, tourism is number two. We saw ag hold pretty steady the last couple of years, and then tourism went crazy and did very well, and that's why we saw the growth. But ag got 8 times the amount of economic impact on the state than tourism does. So when ag suffers, it drags down the state in a big way compared to what tourism does. And when we see a future for agriculture that's a little bit more challenging, we have to recognize that's going to have a bigger impact on us and that we need to responsibly budget to account for it.
We've talked in previous conversations, Governor, about inflation and, the numbers that have been running in terms of inflation, the highest they've been in some 40 years. And given that, as long as we're on the conversation of ag, as you talk to producers, what are their concerns going into the spring planting season in terms of inflation and input costs for everything from seed to propane to fertilizer and everything else out there?
Yeah, I think everybody's enjoying the warm weather, but it's very concerning for our state because we're short on moisture. West River is got a dramatic problem going on. Even East River in the Northeast is struggling with a shortage. frankly, we need some heavy rains, and I don't even talk about snowstorms, but we do need some heavy moisture to hit us at some point, and it needs to start sometime soon to make sure that we're going to have the kind of grass that we need out there to sustain our cattle herds, and then also able to put a crop in the ground that has something to start with as far as moisture goes. So, and then you look at, even just getting fertilizer is much more challenging for farmers. The prices have dramatically increased. The input costs have dramatically increased. They may have even good prices out on the markets, but if their inputs have doubled or tripled, that's less profit margin for them, and that's more of a struggle. They're not able to go out and replace equipment or, go out and, buy what they need as far as expanding their operations, and that sucks up the growth in the economy, and that in turn means less money turning around on Main Street, which hurts the businesses there and the support industries that are here because of agriculture. And it's just a reality we have to have, and we're doing very well. We did better than any other state during the pandemic, but I also think that sometimes that causes people to be too optimistic and to think, well, this is going to last forever. I'm just trying to encourage people to be responsible, put money into reserves, and make sure that we're not overspending so that we don't make bad decisions that end up in 2 or 3 years. We're short on dollars. We have programs we've started we can't fund, and then we're cutting spending, or the legislature turns around and decides they want to increase taxes to cover those bank accounts.
Governor, you proposed an anti-abortion bill during this session. It's called the Heartbeat Bill. It did not even get a hearing in the House. Walk me through this bill and exactly what happened out in Pierre.
Well, it was tragic, Mike. It was unprecedented that a bill would not get a hearing. That's one of the things I bragged about for years in D.C. and why I believe Washington, D.C. is broken, is because there are bills out there that are good policy debates that have been introduced for 20 years that have never gotten a hearing because the leadership didn't want to discuss it. And I've always been able to say that doesn't happen in South Dakota. In South Dakota, we don't mind debate. We don't mind discussing different policy issues. This bill that I brought was a bill that would have protected every baby in the womb once a heartbeat is detected. And it would have dramatically decreased the amount of abortions performed in South Dakota. There was some in the pro-life groups that thought that it would be detrimental to a litigation and case that we have in front of the Supreme Court. I had spent the last 6 months working with pro-life leaders across the country and doing an analysis on that, and was assured over and over again that it would not hurt that court case, that it was going to be something we'd be able to continue pushing that litigation and protect lives here in the state. But at the end of the day, the House State Affairs and the Speaker decided not to even bring up the bill, which is very, very, it's just very discouraging for me. That's unprecedented. It was introduced as every other bill has always been introduced by any governor. Every governor, for the last 40 years has brought a bill forward this way, and it's been introduced and debated. And if people disagreed with the strategy, that would have been a good conversation to have in the public where everybody could understand that this was a bill either they thought wasn't right at the right time, or we thought was right for the right time, because it would literally save lives. And it's I don't know, very discouraging to me. I had asked a lot of our pro-life folks that did not want this bill to be heard ahead of session. I said, just publicly ask me not to bring it, and I won't. If you can make the case that this bill shouldn't come, tell me. Palms up. Let's work in a partnership. They refused to do that. And so we brought the bill based on Jay Sekulo's advice and Susan B. Anthony's advice and national leaders. And instead, I think the House State Affairs Committee chose to follow the advice of one attorney from New Jersey instead of working to make sure we had a good open debate on protecting babies in the womb.
You did sign, Governor, the Fairness in Women's Sports bill. It passed both the House and Senate and got to your desk, and you put your signature on that bill. Is there any significance in that being the first bill that you signed into law this session?
Well, it's been a big topic of conversation for the last year or so in the state of South Dakota, and It was the first bill we signed because it was something that we wanted to make sure in South Dakota people realized was that we believe girls should have a level playing field, that we believe in fairness. And, this is now the strongest bill in the country protecting girls' sports, and I think it's something that South Dakota can recognize that we still value that opportunity for success here, and we'll do what we can to make sure we have a law in the books that is actually able to be enforced. There was some discussion over a bill that came last year in the legislature that was deeply flawed, would have ended up in court immediately, been enjoined, and I wouldn't have been able to enforce anything. So I did executive orders to protect that level playing field until we could get this bill put into statute, and it's a follow-through on a promise to our girls and young women that they would be able to compete here in South Dakota and that their opportunities for success would be protected.
There was a summer study committee on housing needs in South Dakota, Governor, and I know you recently put out a video on your Facebook page updating the housing issue in South Dakota. Can you provide an update for us on that?
Yeah, I think overwhelmingly the number one recommendation that we got over the last 6 months was that housing was a challenge in every single community. And it's career housing for those working families that want to move into small towns, larger towns, and work and live and raise their families in the quality of life like we've always enjoyed here in different areas. So the plan that I put forward was grants that would have partnered with communities and developers to do infrastructure for housing, would have done development of lots and sewer and electrical, all those things that are necessary so that a lot is prepared and then a community can come in and work with getting houses built to meet their needs specifically. There's been some changes and recommendations that we've worked with legislators on that they believe that communities would rather have loans instead of grants. So I've worked with Casey Crabtree from Madison. I've worked with Roger Chase and Lee Schoenbeck. They've insisted that there be loans instead of grants, and so we've divided up the program like that. We'll see if there's support for it. I know that there's quite a few people that don't think the government should be doing anything on housing, and I agree. I don't think the government should be doing long-term programs on housing. I think that it's a partnership to meet a crisis need that we have throughout the state, and that we help with the infrastructure of it, not build houses. But we'll see how that discussion goes. I would say there's not agreement right now on what it looks like. There seems to be a lot of discussion, but overwhelmingly, what I've heard is this is something that needs to be addressed, and we want to make sure that we've got a program that makes sure every community can utilize it, not just big, large cities that can recruit those developers to do these housing projects.
Governor, you proposed in your budget address an expansion of Custer State Park by, I believe it was 75 campsites. But that got some pushback during the legislative session. Is that an idea that maybe we'll have to wait for another day and maybe get tweaked a little bit?
Well, we already did offer different options. The first option we gave, people pushed back on. They thought it was too big and in the wrong area, so we offered our second choice, which was outside of the park fence. It was 66 campsites in an area that already had camping available. Had no wildlife activity in that area whatsoever. And I think the private campground owners were the ones who, got pretty noisy and got it killed. And I would just say that we all need to reflect back when we look at proposals for the future and recognize what state parks are for. It's for public access. It's so that everybody has a chance to enjoy the outdoors. We've lost over 70 campsites in Custer State Park over the years. The 66 was to replace it. They maintain the park, make sure that we had access, and frankly, during all the tourism boom that we've had the last couple of years, a lot of our private campgrounds have jacked up their prices. Now, many of them were charging $80 to $150 a night for a campsite in a private campground, and meanwhile, the campsites in Custer State Park were $15 for a tent campsite, $25 for a camper, and that's the main thing is that people that with low income or single moms that want to take their kids camping should be able to afford a campsite to take their kids and have that kind of access. It should be where everybody gets the chance to do that. And these campsites in Custer State Park just are not the same as the ones in private campgrounds. They have electrical hookups, and that's it. They don't have sewer or water hookups. They don't have swimming pools or other amenities that private campgrounds do. It's a very different offering, but it also makes sure that there's an affordable price out there that everybody can utilize our state parks. So, my job as governor is to protect our state parks, make sure that people still have access, and I think it's unfortunate that a lot of misinformation got out there and that private campground owners, wanted to really limit the ability to maintain Custer State Park, but we'll keep working, and hopefully people will recognize that letting people have a chance to go out and find an affordable campsite in the Black Hills is a priority and something that we should focus on as well for future projects.
You mentioned, Governor, that we're an energy-dependent state. We're somewhat isolated, and when we do things, sometimes that involves driving long distances. Now, a year ago at this time, gas prices were under $2.50 a gallon. Now they're at about $3.50 a gallon, and there are some energy experts out there who say that, with crude prices approaching $100 a barrel, we could see $4 a gallon gasoline in the weeks and months ahead here. What kind of a drag could that have on South Dakota's economy and maybe impact our tourism industry, which you mentioned is number 2 behind agriculture?
Yes, it is going to be a huge impact on both of those industries. Gas prices challenge them in big ways when those prices jump like they have the last 12 months. So with ag, they utilize fuel for everything they do, for planting, harvest, spraying. It's transportation costs. It takes out of their basis on what they can sell that grain for as well. So it's just every part of their supply chain is impacted by those fuel prices. Then you look at tourism, when families are spending more money to go get groceries or to go to the doctor and fill that gas tank during the week for work, they have less money on the weekends to go drive around and go see South Dakota or travel on a family vacation. And the reality is that when gas prices jump like this, our tourism numbers go down. And so we're going to have to continue to tell our story and work hard to make sure people recognize that South Dakota is still a valuable place to come see and enjoy, but also plan for the future knowing that we probably won't see the kind of visitation that we've seen in the past.
One last question here, Governor. Your re-election campaign folks released some information yesterday that you've been endorsed by 20 sheriffs in West River, South Dakota. How important is it to have their support as you look forward to serving 4 more years as South Dakota's governor?
Well, for me, it's incredibly important. Our sheriffs are highly respected individuals in each of our communities. They're elected as well. So they care and support leadership that makes sure they can do their jobs well and provide benefits to each of their communities. And they literally put their lives on the line each and every day to protect the public. This is something we saw across the country, was a disrespect for law enforcement. I'm so proud of the fact that didn't happen here in South Dakota. So to have that many sheriffs from West River, South Dakota, step up and give that endorsement for I and the Lieutenant Governor is very humbling. And they know I'm committed to making sure they have the equipment, tools, and training they need to do their jobs and to protect South Dakota as well.
Governor, thanks for your time as usual. We'll chat again next week.
Sounds great, Mike. Have a wonderful day.